Big fan. You've done so many characters, and a lot of them are very complicated characters. You've been either chosen really well or been very lucky. What would you say in this character, because I'm assuming you take something with you from every character that you play, what do you take away with this character?
I didn't steal the accordion.
But you would have liked to.
Well, I suppose it was, for me, it was a professional experience on many levels. The tempo of this character, as you say, felt quite different to other things, more flamboyant and boisterous things that my CV seems to be filled with. So it was the pleasure of finding that in collaboration with, my co-star and my right, and collaborating with Brian to keep us on the right temperature, for the complicated moods and requirements of what was going on in the narrative. We were trying to avoid sentimentality or melodrama. We wanted it to have a truth and a reality, because it's set in a small town, and that's the gift that Markus gave everybody in the novel. That this is an empathetic look at what happened to average people in a small, working town in the south of Germany, who were our enemy and have always been probably stereotyped or demonized in some way, but, you discover that there's a lot of common humanity between foes.
Mm-hmm. So that's what you took away, is the feeling that there's the humanity, or him being so sort of fewer movements and.
Well, shooting in Berlin with a large German crew, and Florian, our DP, who's been working in the States for quite a while, is originally German, and all of the great German actors, many of whom I'd seen in the theatre, the Schaubühne, and the films they'd been in, and just Berlin itself, visiting the Jewish Museum, seeing their amazing memorial up at the Brandenburg Gate, and on my time off, going to the Berliner Philharmoniker and the Komische Oper and the Deutsche Oper, it was that.
That's great.
The Berlin immersion.
Yeah, that's great.
Could have probably had an acting coach that would want to put us through bonding exercises, but I would have punched them in the head. Look, we found a spark very early on from the first time we met. I know, not quite the first time we met, because you thought I was scary.
No, it's because the first time we met, he was going somewhere, and I was just coming in, and I said, oh, hello, and I'm going to play Liesel in the book. He said, okay.
Oh my God. Did I? Is that verbatim?
No, He said, okay. And then he said goodbye because he had to leave in the car, so he went goodbye.
I was also seriously jet lagged.
Everything is a fluke half the time. I was writing with some kids at a school about colour, and I realised I'd written about 3 deaths from the point of view of death, and I thought I'll just throw that into that book that I'm thinking about. It's set in Nazi Germany, in the town where my mum grew up, and then I had an idea for a girl stealing books in modern day Sydney, and I went, I'll just cut Sydney out of that, throw that in there as well, and it just felt sort of right. And when something feels right, you just do it.
Right.
And so the colours were always there, and then I started to realise that Death uses colours to distract himself from the leftover humans, as he calls them, the survivors, when they see somebody die, and that became a metaphor for finding beauty in even the ugliest times, and which is why I think this time period won't fade in a hurry, because it's like a well that'll never run dry of these amazing stories.
Definitely.
As far as production went, yeah, colour was important. It was with anything. You sit down with a production design beforehand, and you go through a colour palette, and then decide what colour the film's going to be, really.
Right.
And so that's all about sort of tonal discussions that you have to begin with. And it was really important that because Markus has got such a sort of positive message at the end of the book, that it wasn't it wasn't solemn. The film wasn't solemn. It wasn't drained out or colourless. I loved his description of the opening, the white and the black, and eventually the red, and hence the opening of the film is very sort of monochromatic in that sense.
Right.
We toyed with the idea of bringing the title up in red, but it didn't work. I just thought, because I thought that was a great sort of, he has this wonderful description, vivid imagery at the beginning where he describes these colours which form the Nazi flag. Which,
right.
And so, as far as the rest of the colours went, the lives of the people we portray are quite humble people. They have very little, but I didn't want it to be gritty and black and white and all those sort of things, because to me there was richness. The characters were rich, and they deserved the richness and the depth of colour, so that it was pleasing to the eye. It wasn't colourful. It's never ever meant to be colourful.
Right.
But what it's meant to be is rich and deep, and those and the colours are well chosen, and they're chosen for the contrast that they create. And even though it's a poor environment, it feels like it's visually something interesting to look at.
Definitely.
In terms of the movies and TV that you've worked on before, what did you, as you were filming the book, was there ever a point where you were thinking, okay, so this experience that I had, I can bring in for this aspect of it? I'm always curious about history as a director. What parts of your history come into play in the latest thing you're working on?
And very much, I grew up on a street like Himmelstrasse. I was brought up near the docks in Liverpool. My father worked on the docks. He was a railway man. My mother looked after other people's kids and cleaned and things. And we lived in a little 2 up, 2 down with an outside toilet and all those sort of things when I was born, and didn't have a bathroom or anything. So there was a lot of things in my own life when I was growing up that I sort of had a reference for. That was the sort of, the community was very much like the one I grew up in. That people looked out for each other, people really helped each other, and people took great pride in what little they had. And I remember it sort of very fondly, and very warm memories. So for me to be given the opportunity to recreate something like that on film was great, because it's what I know. I know it better than anything else, because that was my experience. So I think that goes for most directors. You probably do things better if you've known or experienced them in some way. And my mother and father were both, my father was in the Air Force during the war, and my mother worked for the war effort in a factory in Liverpool. And so, both of those things, I grew up with stories about their times during the war. Even though my dad was on ground crew and stuff, he used to tell me about all these aeroplanes and flying off to Germany and dropping bombs every night. And of course, when you're a child, it seems a million miles away. And then, later when you get material like this and you begin to think what that actually did to people's lives, ultimately the bombing in Himmel Street is a mistake, but it wipes out all those lives of ordinary people. Regardless of the beliefs, good or bad or wrong, or many of them were wrong, but ultimately, it was innocence that was the casualty there, and it wasn't always meant that way. So there was lots of things I think that I can draw on, and there's lots of things right the way throughout the whole film that, in some way, I've either themes that have been close to me, and that's what made me want to do it. Really.
I could joke and say I was disappointed it wasn't Death doing voiceover the whole film. I know that would have been quite fun.
It was a radio play.
Yeah. No, I think it's just so different. And so I was so happy just to hand it over and say, all right, take the pressure.
Right.
And, because I've been living with it for so long, 10 years in the writing, and then 3 years in the writing, and then 7 years since it's been out. And so things that were missing, often it was just like there'd be I could afford to write a whole chapter. Like in part 6, I think, there are 3 chapters interspersed. And Death's Diary, Cologne, Death's Diary, The Parisians, Death's Diary, something else, and and in that way I had more freedom. Like, I know one of those went into a camp, and talked about Jewish people, and what was happening there, and I think there's so much more freedom in a novel, and so I could have 5 pages devoted to Max imagining having a boxing match with Adolf Hitler.
Right.
And so in a way, there's something really nice about you see a film, and then there's a possibility of going back into this, into the indulgences that I'm allowed as a writer. So I feel, in a way, like that's my medium. And so I feel glad that I'm not a filmmaker and I don't have to make those devastating decisions, what to keep and what to leave out. It's so harsh. Whereas I go, I just thought of a new idea. It's only another 100 pages.
Right.
That's kind of how I feel about it. I feel even more free as a writer of fiction, in novels because of this experience. And everything just looks like it does, and I think the spirit of the character of Liesel as well. Don't yawn right now. It was so perfect and spot on, and I think the performances, you could see that everyone loved each other on the set, and and so seeing, it was really funny when the producers told me that they needed a girl that they believed could beat up the character of Franz Deutscher, and I really liked that. It was funny, you don't know this, but last night when you came up to me and said, I don't like this dress, for some reason I had this urge to punch you in the arm, which is what I would do to my brother or my sister. And then I remembered that part of the movie and I thought maybe just hang back a bit. Because I think she could probably beat me up as well. So this has just been one of those things, and hearing these two bicker the whole time, there's a point where you go, could you just stop fighting? And it's just so I think that's the great thing. I spend all my time alone. This is straying way off the question, but I spend so much time alone, and that's probably the beauty of working in what these people do.
I had a series I was reading in Montreal. It's actually called something. It's in French. Whatever. It's the blog de Namasté, which is the blog of a little girl. But every time that it's the end of the book, there's always not a punch, but always something, and you need to read the other one to know what's going to happen, and that would annoy me so much. But it was so fun at the same time, because I'd always be wondering what's going to happen for weeks and weeks until the next one would come out.
Right.
So I would do that.
What's the French word for blog?
Le blog.
Le blog.
Le blog.
Blog.
That's what I said du feu. It's just very close to Clouseau. No, I still got a copy of a 1-volume children's encyclopedia that my mother gave me when I was about 8. And it had stuff on the solar system, which I still am fascinated. I still read scientific magazines about the cosmology and the nano quantum physics and what the new telescopes are seeing just after the Big Bang, if there was a Big Bang. And there was stuff in there about the history of theatre and how to build a house. That's the one thing I haven't done. But everything else had an influence. So I can't really, because I've still got that book, and I haven't looked at it actually for quite some time, but every time I go back, it's like, I'm 8 again.
How about you guys, book-wise?
Ooh. Go on, you go first.
Okay, yeah.
I wasn't thinking of one.
My answer's a bit different, maybe because I've got just a 7-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old son, and so I am reading books again for the first time, and they just happen to have my brother's name in it, because all my books were his books and my sister's books, and because I was the youngest of 4, and so I'm starting to read all these Dr. Seuss books again, and just falling in love with those again. And it is, I'm reading it for the first time again through their eyes, and so that's one of the great things about being a parent, apart from all the other annoying things, you know, which is all part of the fun as well. So that's probably the way I feel about that.
I just sort of picked up on some George Orwell stuff again because I read it when I was at art school and it sort of left a big impression on me. No, in 1984, I went to Wigan Pier and things like that, and I was just, I don't know, it just really. And more recently, I've just been thinking, well, I wonder why it did. You know, and you want to go back and sort of know what you know now and try and reevaluate why, and because you might just go, God, how did you get taken in by that then? Or it might be, now I understand why it turned out to be the way it turned out. So it's just that, they're the current ones at the moment.
Pretty wide spectrum, this Dr. Seuss to the encyclopedia, the blog. And my question is, when you learned how to play the accordion, did you get to pick the songs that you used in the movie?
To a degree. I think Markus, if I'm right, only mentions by name the Blue Danube in the bomb shelter. I think I'm right in saying that. And I thought that's perfect. Because I like the way Brian staged that you really just thought he was taking the accordion in there
to protect it.
But then it just sneaks up that it becomes...
Well, he's like a rescuer. He's always a rescuer.
His interior monologue comes out as music. I love that. And I was intrigued that one of the songs he played was in the novel. In more extended scenes, Hans occasionally plays down at the local pub and picks up a few tips or whatever, and probably gets a schnapps for free or something, I don't know. A Gloomy Sunday, which is a Billie Holiday song, and I was really interested in that idea that he had an ear for American music, so it means he was obviously, maybe we were going to try and get a scene in where he was listening to shortwave radio, that his mind and his understanding of the world extended beyond Molking, even though that's where poverty and whatever kept him based, But for the others, in the screenplay, and I don't think this is mentioned in the book, for a while it was Frère Jacques that she was humming and that he played, and Brian and I discussed it, and we went, you instantly think it's French, and we don't want the audience to think that's a clue. Are we not in Germany? I mean, I know you get a title and everything. So we talked about, and I said, look, the Brahms Lullaby seems to be the best equivalent, and it's kind of a universal song. And then I wanted to have Die Fledermaus because I liked it was a scene that was potentially going to be in the film, but probably maybe one of the first to go because we were so much involved with Max's arrival and him painting out the Mein Kampf and everything. But I loved it so much in the book and said, is there any way that there could be a nice intercut? Because I just like the idea of giving Hans a breather from Rosa, of being out in the cold air and sort of almost defiantly letting that music be heard by the neighbours. There's something a little maverick in that.
The other thing that nobody's really picked up on yet is, the last one that he plays, which is in the cellar once he comes back from war and he's been injured, is a sort of an anti-Nazi rebel song. And it's very well known in Germany. We had music people look into what would be the most suitable. And it just sort of something else, Hans, and Geoffrey does this so well, he uses the accordion to communicate his inner thoughts, his inner self to people around him. It's incredible emotional intelligence that he has, and he's sort of just occurred to me, he's like an old hippie, really, isn't he? He's listening to jazz and things. And, but so we thought, how could we do that? How could we do that without? And so to get Hans to play a rebel song on the accordion at when Liesel's writing a book at the end of the film, it just felt right. It just felt like she's sitting there listening to him and she's taking in everything that he absorbing all that he's about. And that seemed to be a great way, yet another way for us to look into his personality and his character and get another level out of the film. You know?
Yeah, and he hasn't been battered by
No,
the
he's
war
got,
experience.
you know, his
with the
spirit's
short
still there.
hair, he's lost all of his personality and everything. But there's something that says this musical expression says that I'm not down and beaten yet. And hopefully the audience thinks, oh great, there's going to be some rehabilitation. But of course
It'd be interesting to see how that plays in Germany, because apparently anybody sort of, 20-something upwards will know what that song, will know the words to that song. It could have been, it could have been more violent, it could have been more bloody, we could have chose to make those decisions, but then what we do ultimately is limit the audience. And I think one of the great things about Markus's book, and hopefully what we try to achieve, all of us, is to bring this to a wider audience. And there is that message that if you do have the determination, you do have spirit, you can look at the world in a different way, and you can change life either for yourself or for other people. And so really, if 100 people pick up books after this and begin to read, and that somehow changes their life in a positive way, or that they think about things in a different way, then we've sort of done our job. So the more people that get to see it, the more important it becomes, the more effective it could become. I think, when I was growing up and I seen films and they made me think about things in different ways and question things, they're sort of defining moments in one's life. And so, what would I achieve if I'd have made it more graphic, more violent, more bloody? It's never going to be as real as what actually happened,
right? Because
those images are going to be, we're not allowed to see those images. So what stage of dilution should I go for? And for me, I think I get the message across to a wider audience as possible. Not into shocking people. There's no point. It's people hopefully will look at this film and have some questions. They may not know what happened at that time, if the younger audience, and then it's up to them to find out about that, and then make of it, take away from it what they will about human spirit, and I think people in the sort of worst hours of the most adversity can still have that brightness of spirit, you can still be there. I'd hate to just go, just do something about total despair, and then who would watch it?
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you guys very much for your time.
Thank you.
You're the most democratic.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that.